So, you know that moment when you ask a group of people, where should we go for dinner? And 20 minutes later, no one has decided, right? Now, I want you to think about that. I want you to scale that up, both in terms of the number of people and in terms of the intensity of the situation. We're now talking communally, we're now talking nationally, we're now talking globally, and we're dealing with issues of morality, and we're dealing with issues of politics and war, and all of these tough issues that face us. And even though we all crave answers, very often we don't get them. Instead, life often hands us silence, shrugs, contradictions, and it creates not only a sense of anxiety, but it actually creates a paralysis. There have been times when we've been trying to decide on what we're going to go for dinner as a family, or we've been trying to decide what we're going to watch as a movie as a family, and we get to a point where we just say, forget it. Like, we can't figure it out. It's way too complex, let alone some of these other issues. Now, what's interesting is, as much as the Torah abhors uncertainty and likes things very black and white, what we see in this week's Parsha is it allows and acknowledges that uncertainty. So we've been dealing, especially in the book of Deuteronomy, these last number of weeks, with a lot of certitude. If this happens, this is what you do. Re'eh, see, you have before you a choice. You've got a blessing and a curse. Choose. Very black and white. Very clear. We know if this happens, this happens, this happens, then this is going to be the result. It's like a good computer code, right? But then we get to the end of this week's Parsha. So I want you to turn, if you would, in the larger books that are in front of you, to page 1105. And this is the last part, actually, that Sam is going to be reading. Now would be a great time to turn off all your cell phones. It reads, chapter 21, if in the land that the Lord your God is assigning you to possess, someone is slain and found lying in the open, the identity of the slayer not being known. So we see someone who's been killed, and we don't know who the perpetrator is. We don't know who did it. We have no way. The implication here is we have no way of finding out. Your elders and your magistrates shall go out and measure the distances from this corpse to the nearby towns. The elders of the town nearest the corpse shall then take a heifer, which is a female cow, that has never been worked, and you shall bring the heifer down to an overflowing wadi, where lots of water is there. And in that wadi, you're going to break the heifer's neck, you're going to kill that cow and offer it up as a sacrifice. And then let's go down to verse 7. And they shall make this declaration: our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Absolve, O Lord, your people, Israel, whom you redeemed, and do not let guilt for the blood of this innocent remain among your people, and they will be absolved. So, what's going on here? What's going on here? That's not a rhetorical question. March.
The community is responsible for not having aware and protected.
So there's a responsibility that now it seems is on the community for this, and they have to try and figure out, by figuring out which town it's closest to, who's going to take that responsibility, to bear the burden of that responsibility, but there's a communal responsibility for this as well. What else is going on?
I think this is the parsha where it's about, it's called Shoftim. And Shoftim is like a judge, right? So it's about judging fairly, and also in this parsha it has tzedek tirdof. And it's pursue set righteousness. So this is kind of all part of that pursuit. And
Okay.
how do you get to that point? Maybe that closure where you're not leaving this case. You have this, it's kind of like an unsolved mystery.
Right.
And you have to tie up the loose ends, and then you're not blaming, so you're not like, well, he probably did it, or he probably did it. You're just like, you know what, let's just go to this whole red heifer little ritual ceremony. And you have to be very sure at that point too. Like, it's not just willy-nilly, like, not me.
So let me kind of explain. So what Diana is saying here is that this is in a parsha, this is in a portion that is about judges and justice. That is what the majority of this parsha is about. For all of you who are part of the legal profession, this is your week. Right? This is your week. It's about justice. It's about how to set up a system where justice can be pursued. And what's interesting is that the parsha ends here with a what happens when you can't? What happens when you don't know? Yes, we get it. Somebody murders somebody. There's a process of making sure that that person truly did it, and there's lots of other laws within this parsha about witnessing and about how to make sure that when you're convicting somebody of a crime, they truly are guilty of that crime. But what if you can't tell? What if there's no way? What if there's no identifying markers? There's no way to know what happened here. All you know is that a crime was committed. Then what do? How do you pursue justice? And the reality is, most of our instincts, especially communally, is to say, not my problem. Right? That's where our instincts tend to go. Especially when we're all together as a community. Well, it's not our problem, it must be their problem. They're the ones that caused this problem. They're the ones that let it happen. They're the ones that should take care of it. As opposed to, wait a second, what responsibility do I bear, does our community bear for some of these things? So the rabbis pick up on this particular text, and in Mishnah Sota, it talks about this particular case. And it says, the elders of that city would then wash their hands in water in the place of the breaking of the neck of the heifer. They would recite, our hands did not spill this blood, nor did I see. That comes from our text. The Mishnah explains, but did it enter our minds, that the elders of the court are spillers of blood? Right? The Mishnah is saying, well, wait a second. We know these guys weren't the ones that did this. Probably. Right? You never know. But probably. We know they weren't the ones that did it. Why would they, the Mishnah is saying, why would they take responsibility for something that they didn't do? Rather, the Mishnah says, they mean to declare that the victim did not come to us and then we said, yeah, let him go. We don't have to feed him. Let him go without any food. Let him go without any accompaniment. We don't really care about him. So that perhaps indirectly, through their indifference, through their lack of hospitality, through their lack of care, maybe he left at a time when he shouldn't have left. If he would have had a place to stay, if he would have had some food to eat, he wouldn't have had to leave in the middle of the night when all the robbers and murderers are out, and he wouldn't have gotten killed if somebody would have given him a place to stay or food to eat. It broadens the idea of accountability to something that isn't black and white. And to me, it's one of the most amazing portions of this Parsha that is so black and white, is it ends by saying, yeah, we know the world isn't always that way. And the message is so powerful. The message is faith does not erase uncertainty. It sanctifies our response to it. So often we say, well, people who have faith are certain. No. Trust me, there's a lot of things I'm not very certain about. There's a lot of things that people who say they've got faith are uncertain about. Having religion, having a set of beliefs doesn't erase uncertainty, but it allows us to respond to it from a place of kedusha, from a place of sanctity and holiness, as opposed to a place of indifference, as opposed to a place where we don't care, as opposed to a place where we're trying to avoid or hide. The elders in this situation say, yeah, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility. Everybody knows that it truly isn't, but it is. Now, what's also interesting is a few Mishnayot later, after the rabbis talk about this, they say, from the time when murderers proliferated, this ritual of the heifer was nullified. And the explanation of that is, at a time when we do know, when we know what likely happened, when we can actually then pursue, hey, maybe it was one of these people, then we don't use this. So it's not, we're going to just use this whenever, we're going to guess whenever, we don't really know. We're not going to do the work. When we can do the work, we do the work. When we can't do the work, there's a response for that as well. Yes. Please. Depends on the season. Right. Yeah. Well, it's making them do other work. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, so what Jack is saying, which is interesting, is he's not sure how many ever-flowing wadis there are in Israel. There aren't many. There aren't many that are flowing all the time, right? Maybe up north. But certainly down south in the desert, it's a lot harder. And so what Jack is arguing, which is an interesting point, is maybe because in order to go to an ever-flowing wadi, we're going to have to go, days away to find one, to find that oasis, maybe kind of forces them to do the work a little bit, right? It's not so easy to say, we'll just go and we'll do this nice little ritual, but it forces them to do it. I like that. I want us to think today, because we live in a world that lacks clarity. That is one of the defining factors almost. One of the few things that is clear about the world in which we live is that things are not so clear, right? We can't trust what we hear, what we see all the time. We've got news, we've got fake news, we've got all sorts of inputs that are not necessarily accurate or true. So how do we deal with that? And our tradition is actually telling us perhaps the Torah's response when clarity is absent is not to dismiss responsibility, which is the easiest thing for us to do, but to create ritual, acknowledge loss, and carry responsibility together. That's ultimately what this parsha is telling us at the end. Create a ritual, create a way for us to manage it, to cope with it, even though we don't know. Acknowledge that loss and carry that responsibility together. And we do that in different ways, whether it's creating our rituals today of memorials or things like that. But it's not an easy thing to do. And each community needs to find their ways to create those moments, those rituals that focus us on the things that we actually can't truly control as much as we want to. It's why, for the last 400, and I don't have the count today. Today is 400 and how many days for the hostages? 409? I'm sorry, 690 what? Something. 1, 2, I think we're about there. I didn't look before Shabbat. We've created rituals to deal with loss that we can't control. We wear our pins. We say the prayer for the hostages that we're going to say a little bit later on. We create those rituals and we acknowledge that we can't just say, it's not our problem. It's not something we have to worry about. That's over there. No, it is our problem. It is our loss. It is something that we as a community mourn as well. We need to continue to find ways to ritualize, to concretize these feelings, allow ourselves to work through them, and find ways to continue to sanctify our response to uncertainty, to face it and to say, here's how we're going to respond to it. Each person, for their own personal losses, deals with it on their own. And for us as a community, we work together to create those rituals of meaning and those rituals that allow us to start to cope and to move through in an uncertain world. Shabbat Shalom.